Hello there, Ben Barrows, the Spirit Specialist, and I'm here today to talk to you about the second of the Indri packs. If I tip it forward too much, the bottle will fall out, it'll break it, and I won't be able to do the video at all. But this is the second one, so hopefully you've seen the Diwali 2024 edition review that I have quite literally just filmed. But this is the second of the two miniatures that the Piccadilly distillers were kind enough to send me direct from India, which was a bit of a story in itself. But the Diwali has really surprised me. I didn't have the 2023, I didn't get the chance to try it, but this year's version is absolutely superb. Now, I had a lot of trouble opening the miniature on the last one, so I'm going to start trying to open this. Of course, this is going to be a lot easier during this introduction. So if you've seen the Diwali, if you watched the Diwali video, you'll already know the background information behind the distillery. But if you haven't, I'm going to put it up there, and then I will give you the background. Oh, that's better. That was a bit easier than the last one. I will give you the background information behind this new release, which is the 11-year-old Founders Reserve, named after the founder, who I will go into in said upcoming little video snippet, and then I will tell you what it tastes like.
Born in 1927, Pandit Kedar Nath Sharma founded Kedar Nath Sons in 1953 as a liquor distribution business that would quickly own all the liquor contracts in undivided Punjab. Inspired by the hustle and bustle of London's Piccadilly Circus, the company opened a restaurant named Piccadilly in Chandigarh in 1967, followed by a movie theatre in 1972 and the first of what would be a Piccadilly hotel chain in 1975. When a sugar mill and distillery was purchased in Patalia, Punjab in 1993, Piccadilly Agro Industries was founded as the spirits producing brand of the company, with a second distillery in the small village of Indri in Haryana following in 1994. Located 150 miles north of Delhi and near the base of the Himalayas, the word Indri is also a derivation of the Sanskrit word Indris, which denotes the five senses. India is the biggest consumer of whiskey in the world, but the vast majority of whiskey made in India is actually produced with molasses, making it essentially a rum and meaning it can't be sold outside of Asia as whiskey. However, Indri is the fourth Indian brand to release single malt whiskies in Europe, following Amrut, Rampur and Paul John. And as with the latter, Indri uses indigenous six-row barley, which has been grown for hundreds of years in Rajasthan. It produces a smaller yield, but arguably more depth of flavour. 90% of their output is unpeated, with one peated run taking place every 3 months. Production of single malt whisky at Indri first started in 2012 and was eventually overseen by Surinder Kumar, who is considered by many to be the forefather of Indian single malt whisky, after serving as master distiller and blender at Amrut from 2006 to 2014. Graham Bowie, who previously worked with Angus Dundee and was the first distillery manager for Ardnah Merkin, joined the business in 2020 to be involved with the final blending of the initial release and now runs distillery operations. A blended whisky named Whistler was launched in 2020, with Indri Single Malt launching in 2021 and Kamikara Rum in 2022. A limited edition bottling released in late 2024 in honour of Kedar Nath Sharma, the Founders Reserve is a marriage of malt whiskies that have all been matured in ex-Bordeaux red wine casks for a minimum of 11 years. With an ABV of 58.5%, only 1,100 bottles have been released worldwide.
So, in the tasting notes and bump that I got that was part of the pack that Piccadilly sent me, it does talk about Founders Reserve 11-year-old tasting notes, about Kedar Nath Sharma, and basically it was a heartfelt tribute to him as an 11-year-old ex-bourbon red wine cask. Ex-Bordeaux red wine cask. So this, unlike the Diwali, which doesn't give you any indication in terms of the number of bottles, now presumably that's because of the 4 releases, so we'd have to say, right, there's going to be X bottles of that, X bottles of that. This does say 1,100 bottles worldwide at 58.5% ABV, which is the same as the Diwali. Now, that did not taste 58.5, so it'd be very interesting to see whether this has got enough complexity, as the Diwali did, to kind of work with that high ABV and not actually need water adding to it. So I'm really intrigued, and it's good to see what is relatively a high age statement for an Indian single malt. It was one of the problems that Paul John had, just in terms of so I know Paul John, whether Indri have got the same, Paul John actually have an underground warehouse, maturation warehouse, which is climate controlled, because outside of that, the temperature fluctuations are so extreme and go to such high levels in that part of the world that the evaporation is, whereas in Scotland it's, I don't know, 5 to 8%, it's almost 20% annually. They're losing so much stock. And there is this weird idiosyncratic part of maturation and evaporation through maturation, in that in the first 3 years, or particularly the first year more than anything else, because of the way the liquid evaporates, it's actually the water within will evaporate before, at high heat, will evaporate before the other elements within that spirit. So whereas after, say, a year, 2 years, Scotch whisky, the ABV will continually be going down. In more intense climates, such as Kentucky, such as India, the ABV actually goes up and then starts going down, because you have water evaporating first and then the other constituent parts, the alcohol, etc. So Scotland, the ABV is going down. You get this little uplift in ABV before it then starts to go. About 2 years later is when it starts to drop off. So it's hard. You're losing so much stock out of casks in hot climates that you can't really afford to keep particularly high age statements. And that's why a lot of American whiskies, a lot of Indian whiskies, a lot of world whiskies from hot climates will not have age statements on them, because they can't afford to last until 8, 9, 10, 11 years, because they're just losing too much through the cask. So it's really interesting to see what would be considered a high age for a whiskey in that climate. There is this counter argument in that, because of the intense climate, because of the high temperatures and the very, very cool nights, and the interaction between the spirit and the wood, there is greater interaction because of the expansion and contraction of the wood, because of the heat and the cold and everything like that. It's working more with the liquid inside, so actually it matures at a faster rate. And there will be some people that will turn around and say, 1 year in India is the equivalent of 3 to 4 years maturation in Scotland, because of the intensity of the climate. Whether that's true or not is almost impossible to measure. Some people will argue for, some people will argue against, but there will be people that will say 11 years maturation in India with the climate that they've got. A, it's amazing that they've still got some left in the cask, and B, that's kind of the equivalent of like a 30-year-old Scotch. Now, how are we going to quantify that? We're going to actually do a side-by-side comparison where we take exactly the same spirit in casks from the same tree. We're going to put some in Scotland. We're going to put some in India. We're going to do we're going to do India for 10 years. We're going to do Scotland for 30 years. And then we're going to, 30 years later, do a comparison side-by-side. So we're going to take the Indian ones out. We're going to bottle it. We're going to store it somewhere for 20 years. Then we'll do this. I mean, it sounds like a cool project to do, and it's entirely possible that somebody is doing that. But that's really the only way you can categorically say this is the case, because there's too many other factors involved. But it's just really good to see an Indian whiskey that A, has an age statement, because there aren't that many of them, and B, is kind of relatively high. So enough waffling. And enough nerdiness. Let's see what we're actually looking at in terms of the nose and the palate. So on the nose, now, as far as I'm aware, no peated spirit in this, as far as I'm aware. It doesn't mention it on the notes. It doesn't talk about it just in terms of, summer touches 50 degrees, winter go down to 0, unique character of single malt, result in bold, intense flavours that seamlessly balance with rich, fruity note rather than notes. But it doesn't say anything about peat being used. So I don't think this has peat involved, unlike the Diwali. But this is more an indication of what time and maturation is doing to, I'm assuming, that tropical note that's going to come through, which has come through everything that Indri has done so far. And also that red wine cask. Because obviously with the Diwali, we had the Oloroso sherry. Love to see the PX. It's that element within Trini, which isn't in Drew, which actually I think gives it that little extra dimension, which works really, really well with. So for maturation just in red wine cask, I'll be really intrigued to see that interplay between are what should be tropical fruit and then like red fruit notes coming through. So on the nose, interesting, very interesting, quite juicy. So there is that tropical fruit note, but you're getting a darker red fruit, which has to be the red wine cask, and it's slightly pruny. It's like prunes, black currants. There's a juiciness to it. Blackberries, very much dark fruits going on there. As it's kind of competing, but it's working together rather than battling each other. Very, very interesting indeed. Now, obviously, I'm technically doing this side by side with the Diwali. So I'm going to say some things where I'm going to compare this with the Diwali. And if you've not seen that video, I probably would go back and have a look at it, because that is actually helping me get a bit more context out of this. Because the ABV is a little bit more apparent, whereas the Diwali wasn't. It's not as complex as the Diwali, but it is different in a very good way. And it's that red wine cask. You're getting a little bit of dryness on the finish now. But it's not the smoke of the Diwali, it's that slight tannin element of red wine casks. Just drying it off. The tropical fruit note is there, but it's interspersed with, it's not quite as tropical, it's not quite as mango guava, papaya, that sort of feel. Because it's being interspersed with this, like, not quite cranberries, it's not tart, but when you have cranberries, when you have cranberry juice, there is almost a tannin effect there as well. So there's kind of like, there's tannin, there's cranberries, there's a hint of prune, there's a slight dry spice. It's still quite sweet. It's not like chili spice, but there is starting to come through a like baking spice feel. The red fruit notes are not quite tart. Like I say, it's not quite cranberries, not quite raspberries, but it's not soft as strawberries as well. It is sort of like blackberries, whereas black currants are a bit too tart. So it's a little bit softer. It's closer to like blackberry, soft raspberries, that slightly drying element on the end. Interesting. It's very much changed on that second sip. It's become juicier. There's an element that actually reminds me of pot still Irish, which is a flavour profile I love. So if you've had things like, say, Redbreast or Glendalough pot still, right as tis, that juiciness, that kind of, I always liken it to like blackcurrant fruit pastels. That sort of juicy note comes through. And I do think that's the element of the tropical fruit of the new make spirit, combining with that slightly tannic red fruit of the red wine cask, mashing together to become blackcurrant fruit pastels, apparently. But that was different to the first one. There is more of an edge on the finish. Like I say, the ABV is more apparent. It's not quite as soft as the Diwali, but it's actually got more of a bite to it. I think it's suffering, to be honest, from having had the Diwali. It's still very, very good. It's not quite as phenomenal as that is. It's very interesting. I actually think has it got more to give if they'd left it in cask for a little longer? I don't know, actually. I think maybe if you left it in cask a little bit longer, if you had any spirit left, it might just start to lose a little bit of that edge, because I really like the combination of the tropical notes and the wine, and I think it's almost about bang on. I think if you left it longer, you'd get a bit too much tannin element coming in, and it would just start to unbalance slightly. You'd lose that tropical element. And bizarrely, considering it's matured in Bordeaux red wine casks, that's third sip, sorry, but the first thing that came through was sherry. Weirdly, that fruitiness of a really good sherry, and yet apparently there's no sherry cask involved at all. But that slightly dry note of not a super sweet sherry, essentially I would have potentially tried this and straight off the bat gone, this is probably Oloroso sherry cask. And then the tannin element comes through in the end, and then you get the red fruit, and it's like, oh, maybe not actually, but it feels like there is an Oloroso element in there. It is fantastic, don't get me wrong. I think I probably should have had this first and then the Diwali. I think that's probably done it a disservice, but I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's still really, really good. It's still like proving that Indri know what they're doing, and everything that they're releasing so far is fantastic. You know, the Drew is still superb. I just prefer the Trini. This is superb. I just prefer the Diwali. And if I couldn't get my hands on a Diwali, I'd be more than happy with that, because that's still absolutely superb. I love the balance between the red wine and the tropical fruit of the new make spirit. There was a danger that one overpowers the other. It either becomes way too sweet, or that tannic element becomes too drying. It actually, again, it lengthens the finish. Like the smoke on Diwali lengthens the finish. The tannin element in that red wine dries the tropical fruit note off and actually allows the finish to continue, because you've got more going on. And again, it's changed every time I've had a sip of it. I'm getting something different through every time I sip, which is the sign of a phenomenal whiskey, because it's not just one note. It's not just doing the same thing. It's not got one thing to give and that's it. It's always evolving. It's always changing. You know, the ABV isn't overpowering at all. It drinks superbly well at 58.5. And probably, if you were to leave this in the glass for a good few minutes, you're going to get even more coming out of it. Totally new things. I haven't got time to do that. I've got things to do. I've got to edit the video. But they just keep knocking it out of the park. So in terms of how much this is at the time of recording, don't know. In terms of how many I'm going to get to sell at the time of recording, don't know. In terms of when it comes out at the time of recording, which is 29th of January, I don't know. I don't know when it's due to arrive. I know it is supposed to arrive, and there is a chance that I will get some, but I don't know when, how many, and how much. So there we go. I am already collating together a spreadsheet for people that are interested. So if you're watching this not that long after the videos come out, and you would like to get a bottle of either the Diwali or the Founders Reserve, then if you're not on my mailing list, where I've already sent some details out about this, head over to the website, www.spiritspecialist.com. There is a button on the bottom of every page, which is like keep me in the know, or whatever it says on the bottom. Click that, put your details in, you'll be on the mailing list. But you can also send me an email directly. So send me an email, you can contact us. There is a contact form on the website. Contact me, let me know that you'd like to go on either or both the interested parties list. I suspect that I will probably have more people requesting a bottle than the number I actually get, so I'll have to do some kind of random ballot. When I do the random ballot, if people have bought from me previously, if people have supported my business, whether it's buying a Trini or a Drew, which are on the shelf pretty much all the time, or any other products, or have taken part in my tasting events, which are ongoing, and again, you can find details of those on the website. If you supported my business previously by essentially purchasing things from me or being involved in events, that will give you more of an advantage when I do the random ballot. You will basically get extra places in that ballot in order to give you a better chance. If I've never heard from you before, and if you've never purchased anything before, you'll go in the ballot, but you'll have one entry. Whereas if you've bought bottles from me before and you've taken part, you will have extra entries in that random ballot to give you a better chance. I will try and keep it as fair as possible, but also people that have supported me in the past will get rewarded. So there we are. They keep knocking it out of the park. I am so impressed with what Indri are doing at the moment. And Piccadilly, because the rums, the Kamikara rums, that's probably not how you pronounce it, but the two rums they do are also absolutely fantastic. And if you like rum, you're watching this video, I may well do some tasting videos on them. If you like rum and you've been enjoying Indri, definitely give those a go. And they're really good prices as well. So yeah, have a look. And I will see you at the next video, because that is me done. Cheers.